So buffering standards, the city has quite a bit of buffer standards in its current comprehensive plan and in their land development regulations. Policy I.6.5 provides that the city's land development regulations shall require that where a commercial or industrial use is erected or expanded on land abutting a residential district, then that proposed use shall provide a landscape buffer. A masonry or wood opaque structure may be substituted for a planted buffer. That's pretty specific for comprehensive plan language, but we took it a little bit further. We looked at what the land development regulations require. So we looked at the first, that first zoning district that has specific criteria for buffering. Even though the applicant has identified that they're looking to rezone to a PUD, which provides flexible standards, but there are criteria in the land development code. We'll get to that here in a moment. But we look to that first zoning district for guidance. What you have here is a 25-foot buffer. So that's in addition, well, that would go within your setback, right? So that your setback is that first, the first step in providing that compatibility. So you would have that setback. The building would be off the property line a certain distance, and then between that you'd have that 25-foot landscape buffer, and it must be 80% or more opaque, between 2 and 6 feet above average ground level, or a fence or wall can be developed to provide complete screening, so that would be 100% opaque. So for the PUD criteria, if you need me to stop, do you have any questions? Sorry. Okay, so you can't see through it. So 80%, I mean, you can kind of see through it, but not really. So, but if you can't see through it, that's where that would be a wall or a fence. So completely blocking or providing a screen in front of the
a really, really dense hedge would be like 80% opaque. A wall would be 100% opaque. A couple trees might be 20% opaque. Right? You can only see through 80%.
There'll probably be more walls than fences than walls too. Yeah.
Can I make a point?
We're
Just a real quick point. How wide is this room? Maybe 25 feet?
I have no idea. Okay.
That's probably about what we're talking about.
Okay.
I mean, this is 25 feet is nothing.
Okay. So when we look at rezoning to a PUD, we look at specific criteria, and one of those criteria is external compatibility. So the code is very specific, in fact, probably a little more specific than a lot of places, where they require you to really analyze and look at what your external compatibility or the uses around that PUD. Because PUDs can be rather flexible in the type of uses that can go in that PUD. So you want to make sure that based on the zoning map, that what you're approving in that PUD is consistent with that area.
Mr. Mayor, can we explain PUDs a little, expand that a little? So in a PUD or planned unit development, a certain parcel within a large development is given to the city with specifics, and that's the planned unit development. So it may have, in that large parcel that we're talking about on the north side, we may have 8 or 10 PUDs or 5 PUDs for that, depending on how the development process happens. So I just wanted to kind of give everybody, the audience, a chance to know what a planned unit development is.
A planned unit development is essentially, it's a zoning district, but it's one that has flexibility. You can create innovative strategies for development, whether you're looking at clustering residential, for example, and you want to go with smaller lots than what the city requires, but you're clustering those those homes for a purpose, and that's typically to save land and put your additional lands in conservation. So you get credit for putting conservation lands in easements and things, and then you get to provide the density that you are allowed under the comprehensive plan, and you can do that in an innovative clustering design. So
We've
that's
had a planned unit development out there already on Holden Park Road, that one that's been there for a while.
And typically you see this where you're trying to shoehorn a development into a district that just doesn't really fit. So you've got a PUD in every municipality, every county, everybody has that type of district. And so it's really a contract with the city and the developer on how they're gonna develop their land. So you get another bite at the apple, so to speak, in reviewing this development. So it's a pretty unique opportunity. So again, getting back to the criteria for external compatibility. So all the lands proposed within a planned unit development shall be compatible with the existing and planned uses of properties surrounding the planned unit development. That the internal uses shall be able to coexist in relative proximity to existing or planned surrounding uses in a stable fashion over time, such that neither internal or surrounding uses are unduly negatively impacted directly or indirectly by such uses. An evaluation of the external compatibility of a planned unit development shall be based on the following factors, and I have those here. Again, what are the conditions and limitations on the current PUD or the proposed PUD? What is the type, the number, location, and the surrounding external uses? What are the comprehensive plan designations or zoning districts of those surrounding uses? And are there any other factors that are relevant? So privacy, safety, preservation, protection, welfare. Those are kind of those overriding things that we look at when we're reviewing these types of changes. And then further in the criteria for a PUD, it includes perimeter requirements. So structures, buildings, and streets located at the perimeter of the development shall be permanently screened by a landscape buffer area. And I've included that the land development regulation section 4.2 for anybody who wants to go back into the code and take a look at what that includes. So now we're going to look at the county's buffer standards, and we start with the comprehensive plan matrix. So if we're looking at light industrial, what that table shows you here, and that, I know that that's pretty big and it's kind of hard to see, but I'll go ahead and circle that area there. We're looking at light industrial adjacent to agriculture. Now, within the county's comprehensive plan, they require no buffer for that adjacency. Now, for light industrial adjacent to low density residential, they require a medium density buffer. And what that means is, let's see here, let me back up here. That medium density buffer includes a 25-foot buffer, 3 canopy trees, 4 understory trees, 40 shrubs, and that's every 100 linear feet, and then screening or a 6-foot wall. So not that much different than what we're already doing or what's already in the code today. So when we looked at those standards and understanding that yes, those standards are very similar to what the city currently has on the books, the applicant and the city sat down and said, okay, well, what would help in securing a external compatibility? And the thought is that we would require all EA Hawthorne mixed use lands to zone as PUD. Right now, that's not in the comprehensive plan, but that would force all of those lands to come back to you and, again, make that contract with the developer in the city, and you say, okay, you have to have this buffer here, because it's a very specific, or at least in the city's code, specific with the site plan. You can say you have a buffer along this perimeter here, and you can articulate that in a contract with the developer.
So instead of just speaking in generalities as far as having this buffer everywhere around it, you could just look at the specific properties, especially adjacent properties that may have homes that are closer to it, and say, okay, we want to put this exact buffer here,
Right.
require this exact buffer here. Another question about, I try and think about unintended consequences, especially when we start doing, currently there's no conservation lands on any of this property, right? None of it's designated conservation currently at all, right?
Right.
And when we create these as conservation lands, is there anything, and I know you're probably not completely familiar with the county's part, but is there anything that's gonna adversely affect the neighboring properties to where they have to, or they couldn't do any kind of stuff on their own residential properties, like put a shed out there, build their house if they're planning on building another house on their property? Is there any kind of adverse impact because of us creating it a conservation land? Is there anything that's gonna do that?
Well, all of what we've proffered today is on Plum Creek lands. So it wouldn't affect lands outside of
Right.
the EA Hawthorne mixed-use area.
Right, but what I'm saying is by us designating it conservation there, is there a setback then created on the adjacent properties because of us creating that conservation?
No, it would, their buffer would probably be off the wetland that might be on their property.
Okay.
Right, that might be related to that conservation lands that we created, but it just so happens that that wetland system runs over into their property, which is what you see throughout the
Right.
large extent of this area.
Mayor, if I could,
Sure.
I think it really is important, that question is really important that we get that confirmed with the county.
With the county.
Because the county comp plan does call for buffers to lands that are preservation lands,
Okay.
where there's a conservation easement on those lands. So we need to, as a part of putting together an application back to you, we'll research and make sure we're not creating some hardship on those adjacent owners that, that they unintended consequences.
Because I know we're intending to try and give the assurity to the adjacent property owners that live in that area that they're not going to be adversely impacted as far as messing with the wetlands that go across to their property, or developing right on their property line, or whatever else there. And so my thought is just making sure that we're not doing that, and if we are, if we can just simply bring back the conservation area maybe set back from the property line. I mean, it still wouldn't be usable land there, but just to make sure we don't affect the neighboring properties. I know the northwest part there already has conservation land there, so it's not gonna adversely affect that if it's conservation there. But especially in that area around the inner part there, south of it. No, I'm good. It's just south of the main block there. Yeah, all that area there. I know some of that is sporadic with where houses are, but the ones that are there may have future plans of building on their own land, and I don't want to keep them from being able to build on their own land if they, have a conservation designation that's within so many feet of them, especially since it's basically all woods, and it is basically how it is now, but we just changed the designation of it.
That's a good point.
If there's some other kind of designation that we can say it's conservation, but we're not right there next to the property line, I mean, I would be great for that as well, as long as it's clear that there's no development on that part, but it's not going to adversely affect that property owner.
Okay, before we get to the discussion with the board here, the next steps in the process, they're anticipate that the landowner will submit a potential comprehensive plan amendment to address these issues, so the issues that we just discussed. Now we don't know when that might happen, so the date is to be determined. And the next step after that is that the landowner will submit a PUD application. Again, that date is uncertain. And so again, just to reiterate, there's no action necessary. This is just a workshop, so we're not looking for a decision tonight on this, but certainly would like direction. It sounds like you guys you've taken it all in. It sounds like we're understanding it. Do you have any other questions?
Well, I think we'll open it up to the audience in just a second. I've seen several hands come up, and I can assure you that we will come to you. I think the key part is I like the way that Gainesville has theirs, and especially with what they've been doing there with their environmental park. And so I like that, especially with the overall average, and that way everybody's not just 35 feet off of it. And I really would like maybe, since this is just technically for this designation, that we look at that at our regular conservation area or our regular zoning comprehensive plan amendments. That way we have that for the entire city.
One thing I do want to mention that the amendments that we're talking about tonight would be applicant driven.
Right.
So if you're looking to do that citywide, that would be a different process.
Right, I understand.
Okay.
That's what I was just mentioning. And I have that Hutch will be here at 8 o'clock. Okay. So Hutch will be here at 8 o'clock. Commissioner Hutchinson will be here at 8 o'clock. And we can get his input as well, and maybe just give a brief synopsis of it, what you went through, brief. But I think especially making sure that we're not adverse, unintentionally with creating these things that we're trying to make sure we specify, because there's been a lot of discussion that we don't know where conservation areas are, where stuff's going to be built. And I like the overlay of the conceptual view, as well as showing how that works in with the conservation areas. That worked out well to kind of illustrate exactly where some of this could take place. But especially making sure that we have the unintended consequences covered. I want to make sure of that. So that's my input. Commissioners, anything else before we go to the audience? All right, as we go to the audience, I'd ask you to remember that we are trying to record this here for anybody that can't be here. Yes, sir.
We have the podium available that we put the board up there just in case we need to write on it. But
Okay.
go ahead
Well,
and do
actually,
that.
yeah.
It's mic'd up, so.
Okay, that'll be, well, Lakeisha, can you pick up audience comment clearly from there? If people sit in their seats, it's kind of, no?
I'm not sure.
Probably not.
Okay, no, we're not. Okay, so if we could, just so we have it on the record, if you'd like to speak, just go to the podium and state your name and then your comment. Try to be brief when we're trying to find somebody to answer it, or we'll take it for the record so that we can have it addressed at a future meeting as well. Yes, sir.
My name's Jay Shaw. Just a couple quick questions on your 50-foot average. So you're including any of the roads or rail that you put in where you have no buffer. That will then be incorporated in there so that, in some places we're going to have a 150-foot buffer in order to average back out to the 50-foot buffer. Is that correct?
Chris, yes, you shaking your head, yes?
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Okay. Yes,
So
sir.
that's the basis of the 50-foot average, is so that any of the things where we do have to get in the wetlands, we can then come back and add more on this side. The other thing was, has there been a phase 1 environmental study done of this property at this particular point? And if so, is it available? I guess that would be the biologist hiding in the back. Have you guys done a phase 1 environmental study yet, or you're not gonna do one, or I didn't know if you'd already done one for Plum Creek?
If you could come up closer up here. So we can try to get over it.
I need to define what a phase 1 study is. Phase 1 as for hazardous waste.
Well, we're not trying to
Phase
get into
one,
Tetra and all,
environmental.
RCRA and all those kind of
Yeah.
rules, but I'm
Yeah.
just talking more of, you know, any land animal has been identified other than land tortoise that are endangered in that particular area, you know, through previous associations with Plum Creek, you know, any of the wetland, any of that kind of stuff, any plants that are.
Yeah, we have, we have looked at, obviously, wetlands and uplands. We've looked at what listed species are reported in the various state or other databases. We have all of that information. We've done reconnaissance level, threatened and endangered species surveys. So we've done all of that. Prior to any actual development, there would be a more detailed environmental study done prior to that. That's typically what you would do. This is sort of the comp plan planning level, and so more immediate to development, there'd be a detailed environmental audit done.
I was just wondering if you had a comprehensive one that was available at this point where people could just, you know, we've seen this species.
Yeah, we have, the information we have is in the application.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, sir.
Good evening, my name is Karen Arrington. I have several questions. How can you get a tape of this?
Mr. Mayor,
City manager?
the video company that's taping it tonight will provide me in a couple of days with their download, and then from their download, if you'll bring a thumb drive to City Hall, I can copy it on the thumb drive. I'm not sure that our website will support the video link, so I'll have to see what's available, but I can provide it if you bring the sufficient computer stick, then we'll download it to your computer stick.
So what can you see on your regular, I mean, you guys broadcast this, right? Your meetings normally?
No.
You don't broadcast your
No,
meetings? Okay, so we need to come down, check what time you guys are open, and bring a thumb drive for y'all to, transfer this onto. Okay. Okay, one thing I need to know is, what is the total amount of net loss of wetlands you're going to allow?
I don't think that's known yet until we get more specific.
Because this country has lost 50% of its wetlands. Do you really want to have a net loss of wetlands? I mean, it's really serious.
That's why it says no net loss, is what it says.
You're going to keep to that.
Well, that's what's in here.
Okay. Okay, another thing I wanted to ask you is about roads. People, many places are experimenting or actually, implementing in pervious roadways and hardscapes. What do you guys plan on putting in your comprehensive plan for this?
Are you talking about pervious concrete?
Pervious concrete, pervious asphalt, I mean,
There's-
they're all over the place, all over the
Yeah.
United States, they're doing it in different,
Right.
places.
There's no plans for pervious concrete. We'd just be happy getting our roads paved in general.
So I mean, in the new development.
There's no plans as far as material, and I would assume it'd probably be asphalt like everything else around here, but there's no plans. That's another detailed specific thing that's not.
Well, it's kind of important when you're talking about recharge for the aquifer and all that kind of stuff, so,
That could be included in the plan unit.
well, how can you get that into the comprehensive plan? How can the people here, if they wish that, get that in there?
Now, under a separate process, if we go through a visioning process and the city brings all the community members in and we have a public workshop and discuss what the citizens want for the future growth of Hawthorne, that would be the time then to update the comprehensive plan and include either, innovative stormwater management practices or low-impact development design standards, that's typically the process that we would go through. So tonight, what we've been discussing are comprehensive plan amendments that would be initiated by the landowner. So the city initiated and the applicant initiated process is a little bit different, and so we want to make sure that we're clear that this is coming from the landowner.
But shouldn't the landowner have to comply with the highest requirements possible for saving all this land? Shouldn't the stormwater protection, pervious pavement, shouldn't that be put in now? Because if you do it later, it's going to be too late. And stormwater, I'm going to tell you, all over the country, they're talking about advanced stormwater everywhere.
I'm
You
working
know,
that issue. Yeah.
Baltimore, the state of Maryland. I went to the state of Maryland. They have excellent stormwater requirements. You know, when you're dealing with the Chesapeake and you're trying to save a huge body of water from years and years of pollution,
Yeah.
I would go to the state of Maryland. I would call the governor's office, and I would get all the places where they're doing advanced stormwater, and I'm sure they can tell you, because they're a great example of what the rest of the country can do. And just one more thing, and I know I'm taking a long time. Two more things. This area right through here, this is a regional animal corridor.
If you
And
could go
so-
back to the mic once you point out what you
Okay,
need to, that we can
so
have a record.
you are gravely restricting an regional animal corridor by the way you're kind of putting the industrial, you're leaving hardly anything there.
Okay.
So I think, it's really important, because animals, as climate change, are going to be coming up through here more and more. And I really, really hope that you'll consider that now instead of later when it's too late. Thank you very much.
Thank you.